everybody out there, you're tuned in to 91.8 The Fan. You're in my corner, and I have a very special guest in the corner. Would you like to unveil your not-so-secret identity to the masses?
I mean, that's kind of it. Okay, sorry. Let me get into more detail. For those of you that have never heard of me, I am a YouTuber. I talk about multicultural. I basically teach multiculturalism. Gosh, I swear I can talk today. Through things like video games, anime, movies, stuff like that. I've dabbled in cultures all over the world, but I have a really big focus in Japan, if my name hasn't given that away yet. And I started a new project several months back, a show called Witch Ninja, which does something similar to teaching about multiculturalism, but it basically breaks down the history of actual ninja and looking at popular ninja from popular media to see if they're legit, if they're not legit. I just love culture. I love analyzing it, and I love being able to teach it through the tangential learning process, which is showing people that they actually already knew some of these things. They just didn't know it because no one told them. But scattered throughout all popular media, movies, games, even like books, everything. Everything is culturally inspired. And because of that, I just kind of want to put the limelight on that and just teach people that they know more than they actually think they do.
I mean, I think that's fantastic, especially for you have so many younger people getting into anime, for example, and they have this misconception that anime is the way things are in Japan. At least until somebody says something about it, or they're like, no, that's not true.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So it's nice to see that perspective so people can kind of educate themselves and you know, not think that media is such a reflection of real life.
Right. No, it's funny because it's like I grew up with that. If I can borrow the colloquialism, if I used to be that kind of weeaboo, where it's like when you are genuinely interested in another culture in another country and you get kind of wrapped up in it. For me, I got wrapped up in it because it was something that is, and I'm still wrapped up in it. As far as Japan goes, it is a culture so like night and day different to the US. Like I've always said people are people. At our core, we are all humans and we all have the same basic needs, wants, and desires. But when it comes to social norms, unspoken rules, communication, both verbal and nonverbal, Japan and the US are as different as black and white. And I think one of the things that made me gravitate towards learning that language, the culture, everything, is because it was so different. One of my biggest gripes lately with the current anime seasons is that I just don't like it. I don't like a lot of shows because all of it is like Western European themed fantasy. And it's like, I grew up with that. I want to know more about the things that I didn't grow up with and get my head wrapped around that. So when people come up to me and they're like, oh, Japan is like the best no, Japan is not the best place. There is no best place ever. Everywhere has its own problems, and it all really depends on what you're willing to deal with and what you can deal with. That makes all the difference in the world.
I absolutely agree with you. My roommate and I actually do a lot of these conversations where we talk about, you know, the declining birth rate or the work culture, because the work culture is kind of, it's got its roots influencing every other aspect of their culture in such a way that could, I mean, you could say that it's positive, but it doesn't seem very positive.
Well, here's the thing, and I might ruffle a few feathers saying this, but this is coming from someone who's been studying this country for 15 years now. Sorry, I had to think back. It is my firm belief that every single one of Japan's social problems, including the birth rate issue, the marriage issue, the relationship issue, all of that has to do with their work ethic. Now, I'm not saying that we all need to be lazy, and I'm not saying we all shouldn't work hard towards something. But the whole reason why all of these problems are happening is because people are getting worked too hard constantly. For example, Soushoku danshi, or like herbivore men, that problem is coming up because men are so tired of never having any time to themselves, any life to themselves. they literally go in and work anywhere between 50, 60, 70-hour work weeks. And there's no time. There's no time for family, let alone hobbies or anything that they can find enjoyment in as an individual. So they can't forego their work because that's impossible. So they're foregoing relationships. They're foregoing the hunt of quote unquote trying to find a woman. They're focusing on themselves because they're just tired of not ever having the chance to. And on the flip side, you have Nikushoku Joshi, which are basically carnivorous females. Women, I would say in general, are becoming a bit more hyper-aggressive. And I can understand why. Women look to the rest of the world. They look to female CEOs. They look to women in power. And it's about time they got some of that. It's about time that women got some power in the workplace. I mean, they've had all the power in the world in the home, but the home only goes so far. These women want to go out. They want to live life. They want to not only be a CEO of a company. They want to travel. They want to explore. They want to climb mountains. They want to go ski. They want to live because they've been confined to the home for so long. So many women are expected to just be housewives, and they're sick of it, and I don't blame them. But again, this problem is coming because the man is off at work all the time. How the Japanese nuclear family works is that men bring money home, and then the women redistribute the money to a point where women actually give their men an allowance for the week, the month, whatever. And it all has to do with work hard, work long, work hard, work long, work hard, work long. It doesn't work anymore because this whole idea of putting yourself, your family, everything behind the company it's too archaic. We've evolved as a species so much that we realize we have to take care of ourselves socially. We have to take care of our mental health. It's only been the last 20 some odd years that mental health has had this much of a magnifying glass put on it. And when you're in a society that works 60, 70, 80 hours a week, that's detrimental to your mental state. God, sorry, I'm just getting all fired up about this.
No,
but
I think it's great. And in fact, I'd like to add on to, you mentioned how women are trying to take more control and more power in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something I heard recently from a Japanese colleague of mine where even though they don't agree with the idol business,
mm-hmm.
it seems like one of the only major places where females can technically be in charge.
That's true. No, that's so true. That's like the power that they I say power they have over the fans very loosely because I know it's not that kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But the influence that they have is massive. I would argue the point that idol culture suppresses them quite a bit to the fact that they can't publicly have boyfriends, they can't get married because it shatters the fantasy of the listener being like, oh, they're singing to me. But no, I wholeheartedly agree that the idol industry, for all of the major problems that it has, and it has a lot of problems,
Yeah.
it's one of the only industries where women are actually at the forefront of it, for better or worse.
Yeah, it's I feel like too we're seeing definitely a shift with music, at least from what we've seen here on the station, is that idols have dominated for years.
Mm-hmm.
But we're slowly seeing the shift back into more focused and trained singers in terms of technique, where
Mm-hmm.
that is more important because it has more, it's more unique now than say a gaggle of girls.
Mm-hmm.
Like 50, 60 of them singing are kind of trying to sing.
No. I agree. I believe the AKB48 hype has run idols into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they have so many different sects, SECTS, by the way, of one group in Hokkaido, one group in Honshu, one spread all over Japan, and then you have international groups of AKB48 with different name knockoffs. It's like things get oversaturated no matter what they are, and you have to mix it up a little bit. I mean, it's the same when it comes to modern art, postmodern art, postmodern art, like that whole trend of like elegant beauty and then mocking that and then mocking the mocking of it and bringing it back to its roots. So No, that doesn't surprise me at all if idol culture is starting to fall away because it's just everywhere.
Well, I think there's more push from everywhere else, you know? I
Hmm.
mean, you have it was around 5 years ago that Japan and Korea agreed to actually exchange idols. And
Hmm.
Korea did, and Japan really didn't. And so now there's that extra influence, not just from the West, but
Hmm.
also Korea and other major music areas that are pushing in. So they have to do something to combat it.
And I actually find it interesting that Korea has made such a push into Japan in that regard because there's always been a whole lot of animosity between Korea and Japan. I mean, let's be real here. Historically speaking, Japan tried to invade Korea twice. The first time happened when Toyotomi Hideyoshi was in power way, 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 way back when. And then you've got World War II. I mean, those wounds will never shut completely. There will always be animosity between the two. But K-pop culture is kind of starting to close up those wounds, maybe just a little bit. Something that these two countries can come together with, can have in common, can find interest with each other. It's like the weirdest things will create friendship between countries. I mean, if you look at the U.S. and Japan, we should technically hate each other by all recounts of history of World War II. But the collection of the things that MacArthur did, the economic boom that Japan had. I mean, there are a lot of things that came together that are big, and I think there are things that came together that were small. For crying out loud, anime arguably came from 1930s, 40s, 50s cartoons, like that kind of style. So I find that as much as I really despise idol culture, the fact that I feel like that it's kind of bringing together Japan and Korea maybe just a little bit is something that I actually really hope continues.
I'm sure it'll continue. It is slowly but surely. I mean, we just saw, I'm not sure how familiar you are with K-pop,
Hmm.
but we recently saw the lead singer of SHINee pass away from suicide.
Yeah.
And his album finally came out, and within the last week, the Korean broadcast system banned songs on his album. And the reason is because he has a section at the end of one of his songs where, in different languages, he is saying 1, 1, 2, 3. And the reason he got banned is because he says it once in Japanese.
Wow, really?
Yes, really.
Wow, okay, maybe I'm wrong about this whole thing.
I mean, you're seeing shifts, but there's
Yeah.
still some weirdness there when it comes to, and to be fair, this system is I don't want to say stuffy. That's not really the word I want to use, but it's kind of like
Hmm.
looking at the Grammys or the Oscars.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's very prestigious in the sense that it is also old.
Hmm.
So I think the new generation will bring about that change, but I think it's gonna take time, like
I
all good things.
I think it's going to depend on who teaches that next generation. I mean, I admit for the longest time here in the States, there was a huge amount of Japanese and Japanese American animosity going on, freshly after World War II. But we got through it. One way or another, we got through it. And I look at the history between Japan, excuse me, God, I'm running my countries together. I'm looking at the history between Japan and collectively Korea, China, basically the rest of Asia. And I mean, I don't know if the imperialism wound is ever going to heal. Um, there's a lot that Japan has done to try and close that wound. One of which is they've outlawed war. They constitutionally cannot go to war anymore. And part of me is thinking, what else do you want from that country? Uh, they legally can't invade. They can't go on the offensive at all. In fact, for them to even be defensive, they actually have to call together their cabinet. But at the same time, I can understand where China and Korea and other Asian countries are coming from, because a lot of things like the rape of Nanking is not really talked about that much in schools. Especially like any of the negative impact that Japan had on Asia in general during World War II is not that talked about. And I don't, and I believe the argument also is that I think Abe's still in office, but I know that he's gone to the old quote unquote war hero shrine a lot of times, which angers the rest of Asia. And to my understanding, a large part of Asia has not really accepted Japan's apology, just due to either words are cheap or there hasn't been a lot of action. I don't know, but that's going to be a hard wound to close, and I don't know if it's ever going to get closed, just because of the how Japan handles controversy and image, and how Asia basically sees Japan through the actions of World War II. I don't know.
I mean, that's for the future to decide, and I imagine that these are some of the topics that you get a chance to talk about on your YouTube channel as well. Do you ever take like questions from fans or discuss with them at all, maybe on social media or anything?
Not necessarily on social media, because even though Twitter's extended their character limit, that's not a good place to really hash out sensitive things like what we're discussing. There's no context behind it, or at least it feels like that there isn't as much context behind it. During times like streams, I've talked about it once or twice. On my Patreon, I've talked to my patrons about it once or twice, because I know that those are fans that will listen to me and listen and pay close attention to the context in which I'm saying things. But I mean, the dual problem that comes from trying to talk about things like this on social media is that, one, it's only text, and you can't get a good read on that nonverbal communication, and that's critically important. The other thing too is that a lot of people would say, in my case, what right would I have as an American citizen to talk about the relationship between Japan and Korea, or Japan and China, so on and so forth, because I haven't lived any experience with that. What I have is the knowledge that I've spent, like I said, 15 years seeking out. So at the same time, it's like the internet is such a sensitive place, and that lack of actual communication is only going to ripen the ability for people to take things out of context, to blow things out of proportion, to get angry, and it's just not conducive. The internet, by and large, unless you're voice chatting like we are, it's not a very conducive place to talk about things that are that sensitive, in my opinion.
I mean, I agree with you. You see it all the time with people who really should have just put the keyboard away.
Mm-hmm.
Their entire career is ruined in seconds because they just couldn't put the keyboard away.
Mm-hmm.
Or the phone. Usually the phone. But
it is usually the phone because it's so easy to do.
Yeah. But regardless, I think for a lot of people to hear people discuss about it is important, because it brings the issues to the forefront. It's not something that's ignored and pushed aside, because if you don't have people talking about it, you're never going to find a solution.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned your Patreon, and everyone loves Patreon because it's the new hot thing, and everybody loves it even more now that they've reversed that thing they did.
Oh heavens! I mean, out of all of the things that I usually make a ruckus about when it comes to things like YouTube's algorithm, Twitch, all these other things, that was the biggest. Like, hearing them announce that was one of the biggest disappointments, and I am so happy they repealed it. Like, in all of 2017 was defined as the big man stepping on the little guy in almost every facet of the analogy. But the one company to actually listen to their crowd was Patreon, and God bless them for listening to people.
I was so happy about that, because I didn't want to go to Drip because it looks fugly.
Oh my God.
But it looks so ugly.
Well, I mean, the only bad thing I would say about Patreon would be its new logo, because I don't think it works, but that's just me. I mean, that's just whatever. But no, like, for those of you who are listening that might not be in on what was going on, Patreon was trying to basically tell the creators that, hey, we're going to actually give you more money. But the problem was that it would be at the expense of the donator. So basically, for every donation that you would make. And there were a lot of people that had multiple dollar donations set up per month for different content creators. They would be sent a fee of, I believe it was 35 cents plus something like 25 to 30% of the rest of what they were paying. So like someone who was donating $1 would be charged like 35 cents plus maybe another 20 cents, so maybe 50 cents. So you're basically being charged 50 cents on the dollar to donate to someone, which that's dumb. For higher patrons, like $60, it's like, okay, so like maybe $5 tops, something like that. Not that big a deal, but Patreon is run by small contributions. I'm run by small contributions. So that was the big issue that was going on. And luckily, they listened to all of us and they pulled it all back. And instead, it went back to the system where our income is technically like about 3 or 4% of everything that we make through Patreon goes to Patreon to basically pay salaries, keep the site up, things like that. And that's what we wanted. That's nothing to us. That's easy for us to manage. It's hard for our patrons to manage it. So we pushed very hard on that one, and we succeeded, and I'm very happy about that.
I'm glad. I was seeing a lot of it on Twitter where people were just running from Patreon in groves.
Oh yeah.
And that was scary.
I was super lucky in that I had maybe 2 or 3 people leave, and they were people who were like, I live on a fixed income, I can't do this. And I'm like, I totally understand. Don't even worry about it. But no, a lot of my patrons stuck with me, and I'm like, guys, if you need to leave. Don't stick around thinking that I'm gonna go under. I'll be okay. I'll weather this out. But they turned around. God bless Patreon, man. They turned it around. They listen. They're the only company in 2017 that actually listened to the people, and I'm so proud of them for it.
Well, so for the fans that are interested in supporting you on Patreon, what can they expect if they head to your Patreon and give it a look over?
So I have a multi-tiered system. At $1, basically you get, which I mentioned it before, my new show Witch Ninja, which I put my absolute heart and soul into. You get that a day early and ad-free. At $3, excuse me, goodness, at $3, I have a blog, like an audio blog that I'll release once or twice a month, just to let people know what's going on, what's been on my mind, new things to vote on, and we'll get to that in a second. Basically keeping people up to date behind the curtain of what's going on with me and what's going on with my content. At $5, I set up 3 topics, 3 ninjas or 3 ninja-like things, and people vote on them, whether they want, like last time it was Zero from Borderlands, Genji from Overwatch, and I think the third one was like Ayame from Dead or Alive, something like that. And then everyone votes, everyone in that tier or higher votes on it, and that's what I talk about next time. So basically the things that I talk about are chosen by the people. At $10, you get all of that plus your name in the credits at the end of the video. At $20, I provide a special message, which most of them have been things like phone alerts, things like that. I've had a couple people that are like, I've been having a really bad day and would just like to hear some encouragement, so I do that. And then at the $60 tier, it's all of that minus the special message, but it's also basically a one-on-one hour with me to do whatever you want. I've had people who just want to talk. I've had people that wanted to play games with me. I've had a lot of people, too, who wanted to talk to me about starting up a YouTube channel and to give all the advice that I could, and I have done it. So it's good to have a good tiered. It's good to have a tiered system. You don't always have to do it to make it work. I know Jimquisition or Jim Sterling of Jimquisition doesn't really have a tier system, and he makes good money from people on Patreon. But for people who want to do Patreon, whether it be to make videos, to make music, to make visual art, animation, things like that, it's always good to have a tiered system. That way people can pick and choose what they want, and everyone gets something out of it.
Yeah, I've recently been helping somebody or give advice on Patreon, and they're like, I don't want to offer too expensive of a tier. And I'm like, well, there might be that 1.1% chance of someone coming by and going, they want to give you $100. Like, at least give them the option.
No, it's very true. I've seen a couple of people do a Patreon where the max tier that they have is like $5. I'm like, don't do that. And I'm like, why? I don't want to make it too big. And I'm like, because there are people who want to support you that much and want something and would love to get something special for supporting. For people listening at home, you'd be very surprised at how many people are after that $60 tier. More often than not, I have people emailing me saying, when is that going to open up so I can get in on it? And I'm just like, when someone leaves. And that's the thing, too, that you have to understand about Patreon is that people come and go. People will support you for a time, then something will come up or they're not interested anymore. You can't take it personally. But that's why you constantly have to promote your Patreon as your source of revenue to make this thing happen. I mean, for real, if I didn't have Patreon, Witch Ninja would never exist because the things that I talk about do not trend on YouTube, and YouTube demands trending. And if you, with a handful of exceptions, if you're someone who's really, really good at telling everyday stories that everyone can relate to, you'll probably be okay. Or if you're very charismatic, or if you're pretty, or something like that. But if you're walking in there wanting to do something really like obtuse or nuanced or something like that, it's going to be an uphill fight. That's why Patreon works so well for people like me.
Fantastic. Well, I've linked your Patreon in the chat.
All right.
So they can donate. Is there anywhere else that they can, support you, follow you, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff?
I am literally everywhere on the net as Gaijin Goomba. Sometimes with an H, sometimes not with an H. That's actually a legal thing. But no, like Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram. Where am I not? I don't have a Tumblr, but Tumblr and I don't get along anyway.
That's fair. I understand.
But no, like almost anywhere on social media, look for Gaijin Goomba. You will find me eventually. It should not take long.
Fantastic. Well, since we're nearing the end of this interview, is there any upcoming projects that you want to promote to the fans? Let them know about it.
I am currently working on a Witch Ninja episode with this wonderful gentleman named Joey the Anime Man. He's become a really good friend of mine. He is an Australian Japanese living in Japan, and he does similar to what I do, but he does it in a very like personal style, and he'll cover all manner of things. But predominantly it's like, what is it like living in Japan? What do I have to deal with living in Japan? These couple of things happened. He's also done some interviews with manga creators and anime creators. He's just a really good dude, and we're working on two videos together, one on my side and one on his side. That's definitely gonna be worth watching. That should be up by the 4th or so. Otherwise, I'm just plugging away trying to teach multiculturalism through games and anime. I hope to start. I want to start a new sub-series called Gaijin Review, where I just kind of recount stories of living in Japan, because that's something a lot of people have been asking about lately, and I just figured with low production value people wouldn't want to see it, but I've been proven wrong many times so far, so I'm going to give that a whirl.
Oh, fantastic. Well, cool. Hopefully the fans look forward to it. And before we let you go, we have to torture you a little bit more.
Uh-oh.
So we have a tradition here on 91.8 The Fan, and we ask everyone if they'd be willing to do it. We basically ask if you'd be willing to do a radio bump, but we do the takes live on air.
Oh, goodness.
If it makes you feel better, I've had voice actors with 20 years of experience who have fallen right on their butt.
Give me just a moment. Okay, I can do a really generic one.
Well, generally what we ask is if you could say, hello, my name is, you insert your name, I do this, you can put whatever you want there. And you're tuned into 91.8 The Fan.
All right. Hey everyone, Gaijin Goomba here, and you're tuned in to 91.8 The Fan.
Oh, look at that, that was easy. See?
No, it wasn't hard. I was just like, what do I promote? Crud, I don't know. But no, just something. Oh, that feels good. That feels good. I feel good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. You passed, by the way.
Wonderful.
In one take. Look at that. Better than like hundreds of other voice actors.
That's surprising.
Well, they're used to having a script, and I get it, but we gotta shock them sometimes, right?
Oh, you got it. You gotta know how to flex.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us. If any of you guys missed any of the interview, don't fret. You can find it on the website within the next few days, so keep your eyes peeled to 918thefan.com and your ears tuned to 91.8 The Fan, where we play everything you want and nothing you don't.